Greetings, everyone, and a very warm welcome to day 5 of the 6th Virtual International Summer School on Mediation 2025, brought to you by Nivaran, Mediators of Supreme Court of India, in partnership with Commonwealth Lawyers Association and Singapore International Mediation Center. I, Diksha Mehrotra, a mediator and an advocate, am truly honored to be your host for today's session. I would like to take a moment to sincerely thank Nivaran for this opportunity, for not just trusting me to host today's session, but for also curating such an enriching platform that brings together mediators and learners from across the world. My own journey in mediation began in 2022, and like many of you, I approached it with curiosity, tempered by a hint of hesitation. I was introduced to this field by my mother in law, Miss Sangeeta Mehrotra, who, as many of you will remember, hosted day 1 of the summer school. Initially, I didn't fully understand what mediation could offer, but then came my first formal mediation training, and that changed everything. It gave me not just a new set of skills, but a completely new lens through which to view conflicts, communication, and human connection. Mediation, as soon as I discovered, is not just a tool for resolution, it's a journey for transformation. Since then, I've had the privilege of becoming an IMI qualified mediator, and last year, I had the honor of serving as a judge at the 19th ICC International Mediation Competition in Paris, an experience that was both humbling and inspiring. Before we go ahead with today's session, I'd like to take a few moments to recap what we have covered so far. Because in mediation, just as in life, reflection is a key tool. It helps us consolidate, connect the dots, and move forward with clarity. The day 1 opened with a foundation session on historical perspective and introduction to mediation. On day 2, we unpacked online mediation advantages and disadvantages. On day 3, featured a dynamic session on communication, interpersonal skills, the path to understanding. And yesterday, we delved into negotiation, types, and methods of negotiation. Each session has built upon the last, giving us a richer, more layered understanding on mediation in both theory and practice. Today, we turn to a fundamental area in mediation, overview of conflicts, style, management, and resolution. To guide us through this, we are privileged to have with us Mr. JP Singh, Senior Advocate, a name that needs no introduction in the world of law and dispute resolution. Mr. JP Singh is a distinguished legal professional who began his practice in 1981, appearing before the Honorable Supreme Court of India, Delhi High Court, and various other courts and tribunals across the country. Designated as a senior advocate in 2008 by the Delhi High Court, he has also served 4 terms as the vice president of the Delhi High Court Bar Association. Widely recognized for his mentorship of young lawyers and pro bono work for fellow bar members, Mr. Singh has built a reputation as a leading civil, commercial, and arbitration lawyer. He has represented major public sector undertakings and held significant council positions, including for the Government of Delhi, Union of India, and the Rajya Sabha Secretariat, and has contributed to the landmark constitutional cases. In addition to his courtroom excellence, Mr. Singh is a pioneer in India's mediation movement. As the founding organizing secretary of the Delhi High Court Mediation Center Samadhan and former Secretary General of Madhyam, he has conducted nearly 500 mediation and led numerous judicial and academic training programs across India and abroad. He is an internationally accredited mediator, certified by Pepperdine University and Singapore International Mediation Institute, and was a key contributor to the drafting of India's Mediation Act 2023. His work in mediation, both in practice and policy, has earned him national recognition, including honors from the Bar Council of Delhi and Bar Association of India. We welcome you, sir. The topic Sir will be speaking on today, as I mentioned earlier, is the one that lies at the very heart of mediation practice: overview of conflicts, styles, management, and resolution. Conflict resolution is not just a professional tool, it's a vital life skill relevant across all walks of life and career paths. Whether in the workplace, community, or personal relationship, interpersonal conflicts is inevitable. What truly matters is how we approach it. Today, with Sir, we will explore how conflict resolution involves more than just choosing between mediation or arbitration. It is a comprehensive process of understanding emotion, facilitating dialogue, and finding common ground, not by avoiding disagreements, but by navigating them with awareness, empathy, and skill. Let me now briefly walk you through today's session. Mr. Singh will speak for a flexible 30 minutes. This will be followed by a 20 minutes interactive Q&A session. I invite all of you to type your questions in Zoom chat box. I'll read them out to Sir to respond, so please keep them brief and relevant to the topic. Sir, we look forward to your thoughts and insight. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Diksha. Thank you, Nivaran, for giving me this opportunity. Now, the subject that we are going to talk about is a vast subject. I'll only share a few aspects which will be relevant for our mediation practice. I had the opportunity to hear Mia, and she has already touched about several aspects of conflicts and has made my task easier. Unfortunately, yesterday I could not hear Admaya Raj because I had some other preoccupation and I couldn't be here. So that's my loss. Now, a word of caution that I want to bring in here. When I was hearing Mia on the chat box, there were several questions. And those questions, in fact, related to functioning of a counselor or a psychologist. As mediators, we are neither counselors nor psychologists. So let's be very clear on this. We only facilitate, we only assist parties in finding their own solutions. So therefore, let's be very clear on our role, because those are different hats that these specialized people, counselors and psychologists wear. Now, let's talk about conflict. Simply put, conflict can be a disagreement or difference of opinion. It can be manifest or latent. Latent conflict exists when people avoid the issue and do not make their discomfort or their displeasure apparent or known. Now, this is called intrapersonal. This is the job of what I said, psychologists and counselors to deal with it. Here in mediation, we deal with interpersonal conflicts or disputes. Now, latent conflicts can also have external manifestations. For example, behavior changes. Let's look at an example of an employee in a company who has grievances with the working environment, but does not air them. His work becomes sloppy. He will be irritated all the time, starts coming late to work, and so on. Now, so far as dispute is concerned, it is a visible piece of conflict. It is an external manifestation of a larger hostility. When conflict is out into the open, it is manifest. It need not become a dispute, but many a times we can talk about it and overcome it. What lands up in court is actually a dispute, which we could not resolve. We look for resolution of the dispute in court. Several disputes do not come to court as people do not have the necessary resources nor their skills. These conflicts die within them. Now, one question I want to put to you. When court decides, does the conflict disappear? You can put it in the chat box. Now, let me tell you, I'll give you an example. Like, for example, a partition suit between brothers. When a decree of partition comes, do the brothers become friends? Do the relationship improve? Or do they become sworn enemies? The conflict is never touched in court. You would think, therefore, understanding and handling conflict would be a major priority in our lives. Yet, we rarely attempt to understand it. We try to avoid or resist it. We hope a disturbing situation goes away, but it resurfaces with vengeance. Now, remember the story of that, the bird, the pigeon, who, when he sees a cat, closes his eyes, hoping that the cat would go away. It doesn't happen. In fact, he gets eaten. The positive view of the conflict cycle is that a dispute is not a problem, but rather constitutes an opportunity for growth and learning. Now, people handle conflicts differently. How many of us remember the Newton's law, the third law? Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This applies to objects, not to human brain. Now, let me understand, where does the conflict begin? Can you have the slide? Any answers? Where does the conflict begin? That ego in where there we are. Do I need to go further? Yes, conflict lies in people's heads, not in objective reality. It begins in the mind. It is a product of the mind, and it will also end when it is resolved in the mind. So, defying the third law of Newton, we can choose how we react to conflicts. Now, Mia touched about this aspect very briefly, now, which is very important. And here I would like to elaborate upon it a little. Mary Parker Foley, who is considered as the mother of ADR movement, claimed that, and I quote, the concept of circular behavior throws much light on conflict. For I now realize I can never fight you. I'm always fighting you plus me. I respond not only to you, but to the relation between you and me. So it is I plus you reacting to you plus me. That is the very process. In the process of meeting, we become something different. Through circular response, we are creating each other all the time. Now, this is the very basis of transformational theory. When parties come into the room, they are daggers apart. There may not be a settlement as they walk out of the negotiating room, but people change from the time they arrive and leave the negotiating table. That is the process of mediation or negotiation, as it may be called. So when we deal with conflict resolution, we talk of relationship as an aspect, and the other aspect being substance of the dispute. So there are two things which we'll talk about: relationship and also the substance of the conflict. Now let's look at what are the ways in which parties deal with conflicts or disputes. Now we have one method which is most common, is avoidance. This approach is useful if the conflict is short-lived. Now, for example, you go and park on a red light and somebody from the behind brushes your car. Is it really worth your time and cost involved in pursuing it? And therefore, avoidance is the best method so far as this aspect of conflict is concerned, which is short-lived, and in any event, you may not meet that person again. But the drawbacks in avoidance are it simmers, it can escalate, relationship will not improve, a chance to experience learning opportunity is gone, which could avoid a future conflict. Now, all this is relevant when I talk of a continued relationship. Now, people who have joined, who are married, can relate to the example that I'm going to give you right now. We have certain disputes between ourselves, and it's a very small aspect of life, a dispute which erupts, and you find your spouse really takes off. You really wonder what went wrong. Now, what went wrong was that past incidents which you've been avoiding, he or she will remind you. You did this on that particular day. That happened on this particular day. The last month was this. What has happened? All the things that were being put under the carpet, which you were avoiding, resurface with vengeance. In fact, all of us are born avoiders. And why is the reason? The reason why we avoid are because we have very, very few role models to show how to successfully deal with conflicts. Dealing with conflicts is not part of any curriculum as we move from childhood to adulthood. And therefore, we are inadequately prepared. So avoidance can be good, but in a long-term relationship, where the relationship is long, we should not avoid, but approach the subject and deal with the person in conflict. The next method that we adopt is accommodation. Now, accommodator is a person who puts the other person's needs or desires ahead of his own in accommodating that person. Now, these are people who keep giving in. Now, for example, when the father and son want to watch the TV at the same time, the father wants to watch his news, the son wants to watch a football match. Now, the father, thinking that the football match may not, the result, once the result is known, is not going to be that important. He can hear instead of the 9 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news. So he lets the son watch. Correct? So what is he doing? He's actually, giving more importance to relationship over his needs. Most of these people who accommodate, they think it is too risky to speak up. The consequences can be detrimental. People who work out of partnerships, instead of resolving their issues within the partnership itself, they start their life all over again. You get into a new partnership, you start all over again. So people who keep giving in or walking out are the people who will ultimately suffer the most, because they don't deal with that situation. They give in to the other person's needs much more than they will deal with their own needs. In other situations, when you have to, for example, sign an agreement, the other side will create a situation in negotiation to impress that you are the one who's scuttling the agreement. So you give in. You sign the agreement, but you regret later. Giving in usually results in very, very unsatisfactory outcomes. Moreover, if you are pushed into a settlement, what are you doing? You are rewarding your opponent for bad behavior. It also gives you a reputation of being weak that the others may exploit in future. Who's an appeaser? We appease a person who's unreasonable. Why? Because we get intimidated. Because an illusion, we given one just last time to get him off your back, you don't have to deal with him again. But remember, the man will come back for more concessions. The precedent has been set. As the saying goes, appeaser is a person who keeps on throwing steaks to a tiger, hoping eventually he will become a vegetarian. Doesn't happen. The third aspect, competition. See, competitive approaches to conflict often involve highly assertive and even aggressive individuals who see conflict as a win-lose situation. They want to come out as a winner. For example, a street fighter. He wants to win at all costs. He just doesn't want to give in. This approach to conflict can provoke defensiveness in other parties, establishes the battleground for a prolonged or the next conflict. Why are we mostly competing? Remember, from our childhood, what are we taught? We have to come first in class. You have to come first in race. So what competition does, it actually brings in the sense of scarcity, because there can be only one first. So therefore, you fight by hook and crook to achieve your purpose, right? Which ultimately results into a next conflict. Now, after a competitor, let's look at a compromiser. When two parties meet halfway in negotiation, both give up something they would want or need and meet somewhere in the middle. Now, it is seen as a lose-lose situation because both parties are dissatisfied. Because you give up something unwillingly. It is sometimes used as a stopgap arrangement till situation improves. But ultimately, remember, compromise is never a good way of resolving conflicts. The last and the most important aspect of removing conflict or the style of dealing with conflict is collaborating. Now, collaboration requires commitment from each side. There should be desire to work together and find a mutually acceptable solution. It is most advantageous where parties want to preserve an ongoing relationship. Have we thought about, why do joint ventures happen? Why do people get into a joint venture? The two main conditions. One, you lose one competitor. Second, you meet the bottom, the very threshold of a tender, which individually you can't meet. So both of you get together, get into a joint venture so that both of you can together bid for that particular tender. So therefore, collaboration helps to achieve things which otherwise may not be possible. A very example is about of a hotel, which had a washerman. They were very happy with his services till he met with an accident. And therefore, his work became sloppy. He was not able to complete work during, in time. So they terminated his contract. This dispute ultimately went for negotiation. And what was the final result? Unlike what would have happened in court, since they were very happy with his services, they bought automatic machines. They made him in charge of those automatic machines. And ultimately, the man got his job. The hotel was satisfied with his work and the work of the hotel went on. This is the result a collaborative effort can bring in. Now, having talked about, the various styles that people use, how do we ultimately manage conflicts? Now, importantly, you have to rely upon a model which is known as SCARF. Just go to the next one. Yeah. Why this definition SCARF is useful? It takes me to my school days, when my history teacher used to say, history, geography, badi bewafa, raat ko padi, subah safa. The way to remember, things sometimes, the acronyms work. Now, acronym here, S stands for status. Can you see the next one? See, status is sense of respect and importance in relation to others. That is one's personal worth and relative importance to others. That is status. Then certainty. When we talk of certainty, what are we looking at? Sense of clarity to predict future outcomes. How confident are we about the future? I can say, I'm confident. I know what is coming next in my life. Next acronym, A stands for autonomy. Sense of control over events that impact the future. I am the master of my own destiny. How much control one believes they have over their life. R stands for relatedness, sense of connection with others in your groups. I am connected to those around me. How much, their degree to which we feel connected to others. And then F stands for fairness, sense of non-biased and just treatment between people. Now, it is actually fairness is related to an innate human desire for a sense of equality or equity in social situations. Right? Sense of non-biased and just treatment between people. I am treated justly. Now, why am I talking about these domains? When people are in conflict, either of these domains is either mostly a part is threatened. Now, let me give you an example. See, these 5 domains can either be interpreted as a reward or a threat on the type of social experiences we are having. Because conflicts are basically social experiences. Correct? When we are experiencing conflict, we are experiencing actually the threat response of the SCARF model. Now, let me give you an example. See, I go with my boss, you go with your boss for an important meeting to negotiate a contract. During the discussions, as you had drafted the basic terms, a point of discussion, you start to explain over your boss. What does the boss do? He rebukes you in front of everyone. You are hurt. Your ego, you're angry. Let's take the same example. If you had started explaining those terms of the contract and your boss had said, well, here is Mr. So-and-so. He's the one who actually worked very hard at this document. Let him explain this to you. Now, both the situations, in the first situation, you phrased the threat response and therefore you are angry, you are upset, you are hurt, and therefore you are in conflict. In the second example, since he praised you, that is the reward side of this domain. And once you are rewarded, you're not in conflict. But remember this, the human brain actually, does not differentiate between a social response and a physical response. If you are physically threatened or you are socially threatened, both the responses are either you'll fight or you'll run away from there. Now, in this situation, you could stay back or you can walk out of the room. Why am I telling you all this? When parties are in conflict, you have to remember, you have to ask yourself as to which domain of that particular person has been threatened. Is it the status? Is he losing control over his future? He feels like he has no control over whatever will come in future. For example, the boss dictating things. He has no autonomy to deal with the situation. How does he relate himself to others in the organization? Or is he being treated fairly? Now, what is it that, which is actually being hurt? So in a conflict situation, if you need to manage conflict, you need to understand which domain has been threatened. And therefore, you go back to SCARF. And now, after you have decided, after you have understood which domain of the person is threatened, or you have identified the domain, now you have to follow or move to the next step. And that is, next slide, stubborn. Now, I think there's a slight mistake here. S, now again, this acronym, let me just give you the whole abbreviation. What is the full of that particular? S stands for not status, but source. Just correct this. S stands for source. T stands for time and place. A stands for amicable. B stands for behavior. E stands for emotion. And N stands for need. Now, after you've actually, let's go back to the same example. You've been rebuked by the boss for overreaching him in the meeting, and therefore you identify what is the source in S. identify the source of conflict, which means who and what. Now, who is the person? Is the boss. What is the incident that happened in that particular meeting, which which led to the conflict situation? So you identified the source. Now, what do? You choose the right time and place. Now, every time is not the right time. You can't walk into an office when the boss is in a meeting and say, look, boss, I want to talk to you about that incident. So you choose the right time and place and that voice your concern. Now, how do you do that? First, you start in an amicable fashion. Start by saying something positive to the person in conflict and maintain a friendly discourse throughout the discussion. Boss, you've been very good. You've given me all the opportunity to draft. You give me all the free hand in dealing with all the situations whenever we have to enter into a contract. So be amicable. That's the first part. Then comes your next, that is behavior. You talk, make sure to address the behavior in the conflict and avoid discussing anything else. So you can tell the boss, that day when this incident happened, you rebuked me in front of everyone. And what happened then? I was hurt. I was upset. I was very angry. I was really humiliated before everyone. So you talk about that behavior, right? So first is the source, time and place. Start with an amicable disposition. Then talk about that behavior and nothing else. Then express your emotion. Honestly express your feelings and emotions about what is specifically bothering you. I was very hurt. You rebuked me in front of everyone. That lowered me in my own eyes and esteem of others. After having done expressing your emotions, talk about what you need. Begin now negotiating workable solution to help solve the conflict so that all parties involved can live with the decision and be a part of that resolution. Now, what can it be? That whenever we go for negotiating a contract in future, I'll stay at the back. You call me whenever you need me. Second, in case if I have reacted, you will not rebuke me in public, but you can tell me privately. Now, these are the conditions which we can lay down. These are so that tomorrow this incident does not recur. So what have you done? First, you followed the SCARF model to find out what was the domain which was threatened. Because remember this, once a domain, once we experience conflict, we have actually, we lose control of a collaborative problem solving. As the saying goes, when you are angry, you'll make the best speech which you'll ever regret. You're not in a position to collaboratively do problem solving, right? So therefore, in nutshell, what have I just now talked about? We have talked about conflict. Conflict arises. Conflicts can be latent. Conflict can be, people can keep conflicts or disputes or differences within themselves. They can come out with the same in open. How do we deal with those situations? Actually, you have to deal with, because all these, are perceptions, biases in the minds of people. They're nothing to do with reality. If I'm in a conflict situation, it may not be correct. But question is, till it is removed in my mind, it persists and it needs to be taken care of. And then how do we deal with those situations? Let me just give you one graph. When we talked about the styles, just take out that. See, I have drawn up a particular, diagram for you, which explains the entire 5 aspects of the styles. An accommodator is a person who says your way. You win, I lose, because he's willing to give in. Now, if you see the accommodator, his concern for others is very high. If you see the y-axis, and for him, relational outcome is very important, is very high, because he values relationship more than the substance, than what is required to be done in that conflict situation. Then you look at the avoider, the bottom. Avoider says, no way, I don't care if I win or I lose. So far as he is concerned, concern for himself is very low. Substantive outcome, he is not concerned. Relationship, he is not concerned. And even concerns for others is very low. Compromiser is halfway. You win some, I win some. Concern for oneself is midway. Concern for outcome, okay, 50-50. Again, concern for relationship is halfway. And concern for himself is again halfway. But if you see out of the lot, competitor again, my way, I win, you lose. And competitor concern for himself is the highest, because he only thinks about himself. Substantive outcome is again most important for him, because he wants to win at all cost. Right? But so far as concern for others is concerned, is very low. Relationship outcome again is not important for him, is very low. Now, if you see the collaborator, our way, we both win. And for a collaborator, the concern for others is the maximum. Concern for relationship outcome is most important. Concern for himself, of course, he also wants to win. And substantive outcome is also important, because you win, I win, both win. So this particular one diagram explains the entire styles so far as the conflict resolution is concerned. So I thought, Diksha, I'll give a bird's eye view of what we just talked about. And if there are any other questions, I'm willing to take them on this.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for this insightful and enriching session. So we have some questions for you. With your permission, can I?
Go ahead, Diksha.
So the first question that I have is, do you believe that some conflict styles like avoidance or accommodation are culturally conditioned? If so, how should mediators handle such dynamics in a diverse or international settings?
Yeah, actually, most of these styles, when we talk of, or anything conflict situation we talk of, are culture specific. And for me, I never thought, when I talked about culture, I always thought culture was cross border. Till like, in one of my trainings, I realized culture could be within your own nation issues. It's not just cross border. How we deal with our elders. Do we look at our, there are times that, in certain places, people don't look others into the eyes. So that's considered disrespectful. And you may feel as a mediator that the person is avoiding. He's not wanting to tell the truth. But that's culturally not permissible. So therefore, knowing the culture becomes very important. But I think across cultures, let's understand, when it comes to avoidance and accommodation, I think we are all the same. Because as I said, we are avoiders, born avoiders, because we do not want to confront people. We do not want to aggravate situations. And accommodation, whenever we value relationship, we are willing to give in very, very easily. And so therefore, it is across cultures that I have found that this may persist.
Thank you, sir. The next question that we have is, How does culture influence the way people communicate in conflict, and how can it be managed?
By knowing the culture, knowing people, which background that they come from. As I said, you know, in Korea, I'm told, like, they will not never talk with the boss directly. Like, so therefore, those are situations where you need to know the culture. When you are dealing as a mediator, when you're sitting in a particular position, you should know how that particular person, or the background, or the cultural, you must understand that particular person's background or the culture. Like, for example, like, in many cultures, people do not want to give the first offer. They will always say, like, especially in India, when we sit in mediation, the parties will say, like, let him start. When you ask for a, offer, or a demand being made, or a position being taken, they'll say, let the other side first give their own offer. So therefore, it's all culture specific. You need to understand the culture of people on the table before you really, mediate. Unless you understand that, you will not be in a position to understand why a person is behaving in a particular manner.
So the next question we have is from Ria Chug. Her question is, as facilitators, how can we meaningfully integrate the scarf triggers with the structured steps in the mediation settings to ensure that we are managing both emotional and process driven aspect of the conflict without overstepping into the counseling role?
Yeah, unfortunately, in India, we are, as somebody said that they asked about about India. This foreigner came and he was asked when he was leaving, what do you think about India? He says in India, either that everyone is a advisor or a doctor. Even if you have a cold, somebody will tell you, okay, take a cold drink. I mean, he may not be a doctor, but he'll still give you a prescription. So this is how we actually do that. But so that the counseling hat, we need to stop. I have had so many instances where youngsters come and tell me, sir, for that particular party, I think this was the best option, but they did not take it. I said, but who are you to decide for them? So we step into that role unknowingly. But so far as scarf model, and the purpose of the scarf model, when the people are there before you, even the styles, you must know where the person is coming from. Is he a competitor? There are people who give in very easily. You need to protect them. You need to tell them, did you really consider this? Did you discuss it with your lawyers? Help me understand if you really understood what you're offering here. You can take them into a private caucus and, talk to them about it before you actually give that offer to the other side. The people who are, so therefore, knowing what kind of a style a person is exhibiting, it helps you to see how you can empower that person. Similarly, when we talk about the scarf model, so his status has been hurt. So what is he looking for? He's really looking for an apology. He may be wanting. See, after this incident, the man can go to the boss and say, look, I want to quit. But unless you probe further by your questioning skills, you'll never really come to know the reason why he wants to quit. Maybe an apology will work. For example, when I told you, when in a partition suit, when a decree is passed, really does the relationship improve or the conflict disappears? No. We are found sometimes in a cases where even saying sorry or touching the feet of the elder is a solution, which is not available in a court. So therefore, understanding the scarf model and then following the stubborn. See, sometimes people in a joint session come out with a lot of aggravating situations. I always say you should have control over your speech. And that is the time when you should tell them, look, maybe this is not the right time. We will discuss about this. Let's break into a private caucus and let him vent in the private caucus. And then bring them back and tell him, look, when we go back, when we'll talk about this, you please put your point of view across, minus whatever you just now told me. So all this, ultimately, these are domains specific knowledge is necessary for people in negotiation. But as a mediator, unless you understand this, how will you help parties? And that's the reason why you need to know about that.
So the next question that we have is, Lack of knowledge and the inexperience of the concerned advocate is the big challenge in the course of mediation. How can we handle that type of advocate and convince them?
You see, I've never had, I always tell my saying in almost all mediations is 99% matters get resolved because of lawyers. 1% matters do not get resolved because of lawyers. So I always praise lawyers for their contribution. But when you understand that, a lawyer is difficult or is inadequately equipped, is always better to do reality testing. And that you can do with the reality testing alone with the lawyer instead of, with the party, because the lawyer has given some advice to the party. You cannot do reality testing in front of the party because you'll make the lawyer lose his face and look, you know, inadequate. And therefore, you need to tell that lawyer when you meet in private, sir, have you actually examined this law? Please understand that. Please go back and have a look at this again. And so that his ego is not ruffled, you can tell him, sir, I'm only acting as a devil's advocate. I'm going to put this same thing to the other side's lawyer too. So he doesn't feel ruffled. So you can use this diplomacy and then, move on.
So the next question is from Mr. Arjun. How important is the play of emotion in a divorce mediation?
In every conflict, emotion is plays the maximum role. Remember this, even in a commercial dispute, there is relationship, there are emotions. They have enjoyed some kind of relationship. Therefore, I said there are two domains in every conflict. One is relationship aspect, one is the substance. Relationship is there in every domain. It could be vary from degree to degree. But there are three things in a emotion in a dispute. The outer layer is emotion. Unless those emotions are dissolved, you will never reach the core. Because after emotions are dealt with, then you will know the real behavior. Why is the person behaving in a particular manner? And after you've understood the behavior, you can reach the core of the dispute. That is the substance. So emotion is there in every dispute. You need to deal with emotions. You need to let the parties vent out, because 90% matters. Let me tell you, the problem itself will solve the people. You nearly only need to listen to them. Give them a listening ear. They will find their own solutions. Nobody's actually listened to them. And they are there before you. They only expect that you will give them that listening ear.
So the next question is from Ron Dublin. He's asking, does a mediator's intervention in a private caucus, particularly when one party is being extremely accommodating to the point of significant unfairness, not breach the integrity of mediation process within the ethical boundaries and principles of mediation?
Come again, the question.
So the question is, does a mediator's intervention in a private caucus, particularly when one party is being extremely accommodating to the point of significant unfairness, not breach the integrity of the mediation process within the ethical boundaries and principles of the mediation?
You see, I give a very example. I'll give you an example where, like, now you'll understand how it works. A woman comes and tells me, sir, I want divorce at any expense at the earliest. I'm willing to give up the custody of the child. I'm willing to give up maintenance. I don't want anything. I just want quick dissolution of marriage. Now, when something like this you are confronted with, obviously your next question, your intervention would be, help me understand why. Are you taking this decision after having understanding what you are actually telling me? Like, have you understood the consequences of what you are telling me? If that intervention is necessary, because look at this in this example, you know what she tells me in the private caucus? Sir, my parents have found a man with whom they want me to get married. He's not going to wait too long. He will not accept me with a child, and therefore I want to get rid of this situation. Now, what is the need or the interest of that particular person in dispute is what that person wants. It's for us not to actually decide for them whether it is unfair or not fair. Because it's the parties' dispute, they want a resolution and they have their reasons for it. We need to keep our biases and stereotypes away. We have to step back. That's where they say that you should not be judgmental at all in these situations.
So the next question we have is from Prithvish Rajamani. He's asking, what is more important, following the rules of mediation or the resolution itself?
See, unfortunately, in our country, the mediation movement started because of court intervention. When Section 89 was amended and the court set up their own centers. Courts may be looking for resolution in the sense of settlement of disputes and the matters of their docket. But for me, and that is the real purpose of mediation, is transformation. If you have transformed parties to take their own decisions and they understand where they are, even if they don't settle today, they'll settle tomorrow. So resolution or settlement of a dispute should not be very important till you have used the process, till you have used all your skills and empowered parties so that they can decide for themselves. I think you've succeeded.
So the next question we have is from Karuna Krishnan. The question is, how can one effectively deal with a hostile party in an inheritance dispute, particularly when the hostility is rooted in resistance to a daughter's rightful share, and the family holds patriarchal or biased belief about her entitlement?
See, first of all, when you have hostile parties, sometimes they're not even willing to sit on the same table because, yes, they feel insulted that the daughter is now asking for a share. Now, that's the time for you to actually break into a private caucus. And here, what you need is the help of a lawyer. Parties have trust in their lawyer. So you need to have a caucus with the lawyer to tell him or her to explain to the parties as to what is the position of law. And ultimately, yes, they may be emotionally charged, but if they do not resolve here, what is the option? What is the alternative available to them? And the only alternative is to go back to the court. And if they go back to the court, what is going to be the outcome of those proceedings? Right? So in case, if the atmosphere is lightened or the emotion, the charge, see, first of all, it is important that, venting must happen. But instead of venting in this situation happening in joint session, the venting should happen in a private caucus. Reality testing should happen in a private caucus with the lawyers. And then discussion on Vatna and alternatives and Vatna should also happen in private caucus. See, wherever emotions run high, there are some people may not agree with this school of thought. That some say that everything should happen in a joint session. That's all right. But in our circumstances where we have people who are so, who believe in relationship, who value relationship so much, and where emotions run high, I think private caucus helps.
So the next question we have is from Jay Khatri. He's asking, the SCARF model identifies social triggers like status, certainty, and fairness that affects how people respond in conflicts. How can mediators practically use this model to better manage emotional resistance or power dynamics during mediation?
See, once you have identified what is hurt, now you see sometimes, as I said, like what if this man had gone back and and said to the boss, I want to quit. Now, that's the outcome of why? Because he was hurt, he was publicly humiliated, his ego was hurt. So the answer, and that's where you have to work towards that particular as to, what is ultimately going to satisfy him. And sometimes, as I said, apology helps. Even in commercial matters, where, there is contribution of the other side is not acknowledged. Sometimes validation helps. If you acknowledge the other person's contribution, then this hurt goes down. And instead of the person severing relationship, tomorrow you can create a model where ultimately these things do not recur and the relationships are cemented and the man continues in the partnership or in the company for years to come.
Thank you so much, sir. And it's time to wrap up today's session. And thank you so much for taking so much of questions and giving answers so patiently and demonstrating your live examples. It was an enriching experience. And your thoughts, your generosity in sharing your wisdom, you've gathered over decades of experience. It was truly an enriching and thought provoking experience, one that gave us a deeper appreciation of conflicts, not just as something to fear, but something to understand and work through with empathy and strategy. Conflict is a natural and inevitable part of human interaction. And as we learned today, effective resolution is not about avoiding disagreements, but about managing them with empathy, clarity, and skills. So, thank you so much, sir. You have beautifully highlighted how conflict resolution can go beyond legal techniques. Its importance of understanding emotions, facilitating dialogues, and helping parties find common grounds. Whether in professional settings or personal life, these skills are enhance communication, build trust, and create lasting solutions. Thank you so much, JP sir.
Diksha, so well summarized. I couldn't have done that well. Very well done. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you so much, sir. And before we conclude, I would like to take a moment to thank senior organizing members of Nivaran and the entire IT team for making today's session and the entire summer school possible. Your tireless efforts behind the scene ensures that everything runs smoothly and meaningful for all of us. Thanks to all the participants for joining us today and for active engagement. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 5 p.m. sharp for day 6, featuring a session on impasse in mediation and the way out by Mr. AJ Jawad, our guest speaker, and hosted by Asta Sharma. Thank you everyone for the participation. Thank you so much, JP sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much.